Hello, friend. Retopology. A scary word for some 3D artists that prefer to create their models using digital sculpting tools. The process of manual retopology might be scary, tedious, but essentially it is inevitable during the process of creating high-quality assets and characters in your production pipeline. In this video, I'll be sharing my retopology workflow of organic characters in Blender. We will be discussing two different retopology methods in Blender. First, I'll show you that you can retopologize any geometrical object without using any add-ons whatsoever. And then, I'll show you my personal, more comfortable workflow using underestimated retopology add-on PolyQuilt, which is available absolutely for free. I have been using PolyQuilt all the time recently, and I think it is the best tool right now for retopology in Blender. Also, in my personal opinion, it is better than other add-ons that bring unnecessary complication to the retopology process, and we're going to discuss why in this video. So, without further ado, let's hop into the viewport. Hey, before we start, consider subscribing to my channel. I will be increasing the scope of these videos and talk about more complicated subjects. Also, there are many more videos to come that you hopefully will enjoy. Okay, first things first, I'm going to show you how to do the retopology without using any add-ons. I'm going to demonstrate this workflow by creating a sphere. I'm going to press Shift A and then create a quad sphere, then scale it down and rename it. I'm going to name it target mesh because this is my target mesh that I'm going to retopologize, and to retopologize it I will need to create another object. I'm going to press Shift A and then create a plane, and here's my plane. I'm going to name it Retopo Mesh. So, as I have mentioned, this will be my retopology mesh that I'm going to use to retopologize this target mesh represented by a sphere. And in order to separate them visually in the viewport, I'm going to assign retopology mesh a new material. Then I'm going to scroll down to the viewport display tab in the bottom and click on the color property tab. Then I'm going to pick a preferred color and then tweak alpha value so that it will be transparent. As you can see in the viewport, I can see through my retopo mesh in the viewport while my target mesh is still solid. So basic retopology setup using Blender default tools with no add-ons is pretty simple. To start it right away, you will need to use snapping tools. Here's the snapping tab on top, and I will click Faces option here, and then I'm going to click on a magnet icon so that all my edited vertices snap automatically to target mesh. Now let's snap them. Okay, my vertices are snapping correctly, but as you can see, I can't see my mesh properly. In order to mitigate this problem, I'm going to select my retopo mesh here and then go to Viewport Display tab in Object Properties and tick In Front option. Now retopologized mesh is in front of my object, and this is great. In order to create a new mesh, I'm extruding my vertices like this, and then I select them and press F to create a new face. Then I extrude and then select all 4 vertices and then press F to create a new strip of faces. And as you can see, this whole process is quite straightforward. And if I want to see wireframe, then I can turn it on in the Properties Viewport Display tab too. And now that I've ticked that option, I can see my wireframe clearly on my low poly retopo mesh. This is all great, but there is a problem here. When I view it from the backside, I can still see my mesh. To mitigate that problem, you need to click on the Shading tab here, and in the Viewport Shading options, tick Backface Culling option. When you turn that option on, you won't see your mesh from the other side. This is basically the whole setup that you need to retopologize your mesh without using any add-ons in Blender. Also, I can press Ctrl A and apply all transforms, which will reset my object's origin to the center of the world coordinates. And then I can go to the modifier tab and then use mirror modifier and turn its clipping mode. And this will allow me to clip my geometry depending on the axis I have chosen in the mirror modifier options. In this case it's x-axis. And then I can keep retopologizing my object further. This is all cool, but the real problem emerges when I start using default loop cuts. For example, let's extend this mesh here, and I'm going to use loop cuts to create more mesh density. And as you can see, my newly created loop cuts do not snap properly to target mesh. And in order to mitigate that problem without using any add-ons, I can use another modifier, namely the shrink wrap modifier, and then choose my target mesh as a target of that modifier, and also tick show cage option to see changes made by the modifier in edit mode. Then, as you can see, my newly created loop cuts correctly snapped back to my target mesh, which is great. And basically with this workflow you can retopologize any high poly mesh, and you can control over every vertex you create, and you can extrude your edges to make new faces and so on. And this workflow seems really powerful, right? Wrong. As you may have noticed, this workflow requires a lot of clicking and a lot of camera movement around your target mesh. And when your model is very complicated and dense and have different crevices, you will have to constantly manually tweak your mesh, especially when you need equalized mesh density. Here's an example. I have these loop cuts that I've created, and I want to make these selected faces get the same mesh density as the other ones around them. And you will find out that it's very hard to do, because you have to select every vertex one by one and move them around like that. And then you will have to edit this whole polygon line. Or I can go to Vertex option tab and click on Smooth Vertices. But this will distort my mesh as well, and this is not a perfect solution, right? Then I can try and mitigate that problem by turning on proportional editing mode and turning on connected only option, and start dragging everything on my retopologized mesh, trying to fix this problem. And sometimes, if you're not using any add-ons to retopologize your mesh in Blender, you can come across this problem and you will get annoyed very quickly. And you will have to move your vertices around a lot and make crazy amount of clicks, which can be very frustrating, annoying, and time consuming. And to mitigate that problem, you can use specialized add-ons available for Blender as of now. But in my opinion, the best one is by far PolyQuilt add-on. And in a second we're going to look at my personal retopology workflow using PolyQuilt add-on. Alright, now I'm going to demonstrate my retopology workflow using add-ons. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to use two add-ons, and I'm going to provide download links to every add-on I use in the video description down below. I'm going to quickly name these add-ons. The first one will be MACHIN3TOOL'S Shading PIE that will allow me to turn on backface culling mode and in-front mode to retopology mesh that I'm going to create. And one of the most important add-ons out of these two is PolyQuilt add-on. It's another add-on that is available for free on GitHub, and I'm going to provide a link to it, as I have mentioned previously. In my opinion, it's an amazing retopology add-on and a must-have for retopology in Blender. And I love using this add-on way better than other tools for retopology like Retopoflow 3, because PolyQuilt allows you to stay in the edit mode. Let me demonstrate. Let's create our usual setup for retopology. I'm going to create our usual sphere, and I'm going to name it Target Mesh, as I did previously. Then I'm going to create my plane and name it Retopo Mesh. After that, I'm going to apply all transforms so that origin point of the object snaps to the center of the world coordinates. Then I'm going to turn on my face snapping mode as I did previously. I'm going to open Materials tab and add a new material. Then in the Viewport Display tab, I'm going to change its color to green and then tweak its alpha value in the same color section panel. And as you may have noticed, the object is now transparent. After that, I will open my Shading PIE and turn on In Front option to make it appear above my target mesh. And then I'm going to turn the back face culling mode on. After setting everything up, I'm going to enter edit mode. As you may see, after you enable PolyQuilt add-on, there's a new button going to appear in your tools panel on the left side of the viewport. I have hotkeyed PolyQuilt to Ctrl W, which I'm going to press to turn this add-on on. After enabling PolyQuilt, you can see that I have new editing options appearing in the viewport on my mesh. You can see that edges are highlighted now. There are little arrows popping out and vertices get highlighted too. I can move these vertices around, and because the snapping mode is turned on, everything is going to snap the way it did when you retopologize your mesh using standard Blender tools without any add-ons. Which is really great. Okay, let me delete this polygon and I'm going to turn on the symmetry mode in PolyQuilt's tools options. Also, I want to mention an amazing thing about PolyQuilt is the Master Tools settings here. It's a drop-down menu that allows you to assign different hotkeys to different add-ons functions. For example, I have set up Ctrl-Alt left-click to dissolve loop, Alt to delete, Ctrl to add loop cut, and Shift left-click for smooth mesh operation. And you can save your own key map and customize it the way you like. And now what happens when PolyQuilt is turned on, I can click on my mesh and create polys in the viewport and they automatically snap to the surface of my target mesh. And then I can do this thing, and as you can see my mesh snaps perfectly in the middle here as I have turned on the symmetry mode, and newly created mesh appears on both sides. And also what is awesome, I can now add loop cuts, and as you remember with default Blender tools, newly added loop cuts are not going to snap to target mesh. But PolyQuilt tools, as you can see, work perfectly and snap everything to target object. And most importantly, I can now hold my Shift key and click on my mesh to relax it, which is really cool, and this functionality is not available using the default out-of-the-box tools in Blender. Once again, see, I'm holding my Shift key and PolyQuilt is calculating the relaxation of my mesh, taking into account the outer borders of this retopology mesh. And if you have used specialized retopology software or another digital content creation software, I personally used Maya a lot, and Maya has Quad Draw tool, and PolyQuilt add-on in Blender is basically mimicking Quad Draw tools functionality in Maya, which is an amazing retopology tool in my opinion. As you can see, you can quickly create your mesh like this. Everything will snap properly. If you hover over your edge, then you get this little arrow icon, and you can extrude it and create certain poly strips, and you can also hold Control to create new loop cuts, and everything will be working ideally for retopology process. Also, a functionality that I really like is is this. If you hover over a single vertex here and hold a left click, you can cut your edges like that. And as you may know, such handy topological configuration allows you to increase the poly count. It's very useful during the retopology process when you're dealing with a dense mesh. As an example, this can be a retopology process of hands of your character, parts where the topology of your character's face transitions into neck and so on. This functionality is awesome. And my main message is that to retopologize everything effectively, you will just need these tools. And the awesome thing about PolyQuilt tool is that everything is done in edit mode. And you're not dragged out of it, and you can switch to your default selection mode. You can tweak your mesh using other Blender's default tools. But of course, why would you? You can quickly switch between tools. And PolyQuilt has a lot of functionality built into it. In my opinion, PolyQuilt is better than Retopoflow because it's super ultra fast, because you're not introduced to a new retopology mode like Retopoflow does. And you can retopologize your mesh staying in edit mode. And this makes your retopology process so fast and, most importantly, intuitive. I'm just amazed by this tool, and I want a lot more people to use it and share it, and maybe help with its development on GitHub, and fix or report bugs if they emerge. Of course, every tool has some bugs. There are no tools that are absolutely perfect, and PolyQuilt is not an exception. So this was the example of retopology using PolyQuilt tool, and I'm going to show you a little time lapse of me retopologizing a creature character that I've made using PolyQuilt, and we're going to discuss the retopology process afterwards. See you in a second. Okay, here's a real production application of the workflows I have mentioned in the previous parts of the video. So I have sculpted this creature in ZBrush. It was a preliminary high poly sculpt, and I intended to sculpt some more after I retopologized the model in Blender to make it riggable and create proper UV maps. So I have decimated the mesh in ZBrush and exported the high poly mesh to Blender, where I have started the process of retopology. I have to mention that at the time of recording this video, I was not aware that PolyQuilt has symmetry mode inbuilt into it. So I've used mirror modifier to mirror my mesh and kind of combine the usage of default Blender's tools with PolyQuilt add-on. But these days I'd retopologize the same model only using PolyQuilt workflow. I'm not going to bore you with the process of retopologizing the whole model because it's hours of work, and sometimes I make mistakes and have to correct them. Manual retopology is always quite time consuming and requires planning. My general tips for retopology of organic models would be the following. Start by creating a very small quantity of polygon loops and concentrate on areas that are going to deform or bend, as you can always increase the number of your polys. Primary areas that I would concentrate my attention on during the retopology process is the area around eyes, neck, mouth, ears, nose, and everything that is possibly going to deform by joints or shape keys afterwards, like elbow areas, wrist areas, finger digits, knee areas, and so on. You will need to make sure that these areas have proper polygonal loops, and to check loops you can use loop cut tools in Blender. As you can see, I use PolyQuilt's Relax tool a lot to relax some troublesome areas of my mesh, which will be difficult using only Blender's default tools. The model I have worked on had very unusual for a bipedal character geometrical details, and I had to preserve that geometrical details too, so that afterwards the high poly sculpt details could be properly baked onto my low poly rigged model. I have retopologized all the parts of my creature character using PolyQuilt and standard Blender tools, trying to keep everything low poly, but at the same time not to lose geometrical curvature in details. I have moved on from different parts of my character, from creature's face to its armpit and neck area. Then I have proceeded with the retopology of hands and torso. Legs were the last thing that have been retopologized. Now let's take a look at the final geometry that I've created after the process of retopology. I have highlighted poly loops of mesh with different colors so that you could take a look at the areas that usually require utmost attention during the process of retopology, as they are going to deform or bend after rigging. Having a nice topological flow and equal mesh density allowed me to easily create good UVs with great texel density in Blender, which will be beneficial during the texturing process in external texturing software. Having a good topology allowed me to reproject details from my high poly model back onto low poly model in ZBrush, and continue working on my high poly sculpt on higher subdivision levels of my mesh. Proper topology will also make weight painting and rigging process much easier in the future. So that was my retopology guide in Blender. We've covered methods of retopologizing your model using standard Blender tools and PolyQuilt add-on, and briefly looked at a real application of these methods. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Have a nice day. Thank you for watching this video, hope you liked it, and I wanted to remind you to subscribe as more content will be uploaded to this channel soon related to both hard surface and organic modeling, rigging, rendering, and animation.